Once you're within about arm's length of either the front doors or the back door, it'll sense that it's there. Okay?
Oh.
So you never have to take it out of your pocket. I'm just going to put the tag back here. One end goes in the car, the other end goes into a regular outlet.
Okay. Three-pronged outlet.
Right. Electronic switch. So right now it's on. The red light tells you it's on, and the word park tells you that it's on.
Ooh.
And we're gonna turn it off just by pushing down on it. Okay. And you can feel it drives just like a regular car.
Charging station.
Hello.
Thank you for not taking my life. From the old to the new.
coordinator for Athens Soil and Water Conservation District, but in another life, my better half here, Lee Caldwell, and I founded the Ohio Bluebird Society back in '87. We both worked for Ohio State Parks, and I was the naturalist at Malabar Farm State Park, and he was the ranger. I knew him for 2 years as a friend, and he would continuously invite me out on his 60-box bluebird trail. It was a 600-plus acre park, and he had 60 bluebird boxes out, and he had to make rounds every single day in order to get through all of them in a week. He was also a federal bird bander at the time for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, so he was banding and recording these birds. And little did I know that he was courting me on that bluebird trail. 3 years later, we were married, and then he became the park manager down here at Stroud's Run, and that's what brought us here.
It took a lot of root beer floats to get
root beer floats. I actually was the house mother at the youth hostel. I'd probably be sitting on the swing, and he'd say, "You want to go out for a root beer float? You know, we'll get some bluebird boxes on the way." Bluebirds have always been our passion. I've always loved birds. I can remember as a child, I grew up on a farm. My grandfather was probably one of the early conservationists. Back in the 20s, he was one of the last of the commercial fishermen on the Great Lakes. He knew that the lake was dying. He was telling the federal government that the lake is dying, that it fell upon deaf ears. But my dad always had an interest in nature and wildlife, and he passed that on to us kids. So I can remember as a 4th grader sitting very, very quietly, just hoping the birds would come close enough because I didn't own a pair of binoculars. So when I met Reed, that was a natural draw for us because he also has been a lifelong birder. How many of you plan a trip around going to see birds? Okay. The first years of our marriage, every year we'd go to Hawk Mountain to watch the hawks migrate. How many of you keep a life list of the birds that you've seen? This is what a lifer does. Division of Wildlife actually has the. How many of you have a bluebird box? How many of you have had a bluebird box? No success. I get everything but.
I got house wrens.
House wrens. Okay. It's like real estate, location, location, location.
Well, I've been a birder for as long as I can remember. I grew up down in Cider County, Shawnee Forest, and my backyard was a 70,000 acre forest. I started with bluebirds around 1976. In 1980, I was hired by the state as a ranger at Malabar Farm State Park, and that's where we kind of got started. I became a member of the North American Bluebird Society because there were members in Ohio here that would come into the Malabar area there, Mansfield, Perrysville, when they would come up for the weekends, and they had a bunch of trails in the area. And then I was running this bluebird trail at Malabar, and Bob and Dick brought some boxes up. And one of the boxes I still have today that's followed me everywhere I've gone. And that box was made out of redwood and cedar, and it was painted. Bob made it in 1962. And it has raised bluebirds every year since 1962. Right now it's on its 2nd brood in my yard. It's got 4 eggs in the nest. They fledged out 4 earlier. So it's kind of been a history. This is the 3rd year? Yeah. A lot of times when I talk to kids groups, they'll think that a bluebird is a big old blue jay. Well, yeah, it is a bluebird, but it's not of what the species we call a bluebird. There's actually 3 species of bluebirds in North America. There's the eastern bluebird, which we have in our area. Covers the largest range from Canada down into Cuba. It goes over to about the Mississippi River. They're very similar, all 3 species are. And then when you get into the Rocky Mountain areas, you'll get into the mountain bluebird. Now, all 3 species of bluebirds are members of the thrush family, which is cousin to the robin. The eastern bluebird, especially the male of the species, is probably the brightest, bluest of all the bluebirds, and the markings are the most beautiful blue-black, and then the ruddy breast here, red breast, and then a white underbelly. It catches your attention because it almost seems to stand out from the surroundings. When you think of a lot of things in nature, you think that they're drab and they kind of blend in. Female bluebird, she is duller than the male, most of the time sitting on the nest. After about the 8th day in the nest, the sheaths from the feathers, you know, primary feathers, start breaking out. They're like little fingers that come off the wings, you know. And I can start telling by the percentage of blue in there whether that's a male or a female. In the winter range, the bluebird in our area in the summer, in the nesting range, they're not migrants like, let's say, a tree swallow. They all migrate, but some in our area may move down to southern Tennessee It's more of a dispersal. They may move down as far as into Cuba. Because of the resources and because of the nature of what bluebirds eat, there's not a lot of insects here in the wintertime. Some will stay because they shift over in what they're eating. And actually I found out through banding, members of the same brood, let's say I hatch out 5 birds from a box here and I've banded them. I might retrap the winter, I might retrap 2 or 3 of those birds, and others will have migrated. So they don't all just stay here. Bluebirds in the winter will utilize these boxes in really bad weather. They will pack in the box. I've opened up boxes from out at night and look at it with light and everything, and they would be packed in, just all around. I mean, just to conserve heat. And it's not unusual for the guy on the bottom to not make it. Literally get suffocated. We'll use these as roosting boxes in the winter, and we've actually had a part where we went through and winterized our boxes.
This past winter, I saw more bluebirds than I've ever seen. And I was just wondering, what do they live on?
They will revert to things like berries and multiflora rose, and you save the berries from the dogwoods. Which brings me to the multiflora rose. As bad as people think it is, it has become a tremendous food for those birds in the winter, as well as in ice storms put feeders with dogwood berries and things such as blueberries. Also another thing is mealworms. In our area here in southern Ohio, the bluebirds usually will start nesting around the 15th of March, around the middle of March, and you want to have your boxes up. We will get as many as 3 broods in season. The male bluebird is the one that picks out the nest site. I really haven't talked about the fact that we build the boxes because we don't have a lot of natural cavities available. Well, he'll go out and he'll find a nest site, perches on top of the box, and he starts singing. If a female bluebird is interested, she will fly over to the box. Usually she'll land right on it. Then she will go in the box. She'll check it out. And then if she comes back out and perches on top of the box with him, she has accepted the box as her nest site and him as her mate. When nesting starts, they will start building, pretty quickly. And I mean, I've seen nests built in just a couple of days. Some that might take a week. The weather has a lot of effect. Cold spells, especially in the early nestings, will slow them down and start them back up. But anyway, once the nest is built, she forms a cup. She will lay her first egg in the nest. And usually that first egg is laid in mid-morning. And I mean, I go out and check it right around after 10 o'clock. You go there at 9 o'clock, it might not be laid. 11 o'clock, the first egg is in there, And she'll lay 1 egg a day. For usually on the first brood, it's 5, it could be 6 eggs. Then she does not start incubation until after the last egg in the clutch is laid. And the female is the only one that can incubate because she's the only one that has the brood patch on the underbelly here. I'm banding them, we have them in our hands a lot, but you kind of blood the feathers there and you'll see there's no feathers there. And it's just an area where a lot of blood vessels come together. So that imparts heat. These eggs can suffer some pretty cold weather and even freezing before incubation starts. But once incubation starts, then it has to be maintained or the eggs will die. And that's why rainy weather in the spring is really bad. She will incubate for about 2 weeks, all start hatching at the same time. If you look at how, that's pretty typical of the hatching there. The young come out, they don't have much in the way of hair on them, little tufts of dark fuzz, if you will, and they're pretty well naked as far other than that. Once they hatch, bluebirds are very great with nest sanitation. They will get those eggshells out of there. The shortest incubation periods could be around 12 days.
She's chosen the box and she's now going about building the nest. And I think this is very, very interesting. If you've ever wondered, if you just watch her just a bit here, it is a long video, so I will let you watch it for a moment and then I'll advance it so that you can see some of her movements in here to adjust the grasses, which is predominantly dead grasses that they use for the nesting material. And sometimes you can tell the species of a bird that you have in the box
by the nest material.
By the nesting material. If you have moss, it's probably chickadees. If you have a grassy nest with feathers, it's probably a tree swallow. So they can be known by that. So let me see if I can just advance this.
Usually in the spring there's a lot of dead grasses available. They dried out after the winter snows. But also if they're in an area where there's pine trees, they'll use a lot of pine needles. I mean, because that's whatever's quick and easy.
Okay, so
what'd you say the swallow was again? The
tree swallow.
yeah, but
See how she?
what did you use for material?
What kind of
She'll use
nesting
her body to
feathers
form
in her?
that
She'll
nest.
use her body to form that nest. She actually will spread her wings. watch it there, spread her wings, and she'd pack it in.
Teresa, what kind of nesting material does a tree swallow use?
Oh, the tree swallow has pretty much the same nesting material as a bluebird, except they finish their nest off by gathering up feathers from other birds. Reed and I were at Malabar. It was a working farm, and so they had a chicken house there. And we used to go down, and as the chickens would preen themselves, they'd molt, they'd lose feathers. And so we would gather those up, go out to a box that we knew had tree swallows getting ready to build their nest there, and throw them up in the air, and they'd dart around gathering them all and taking them to the box. The male doesn't really build the nest, but he will periodically come in and check out the work. Some people say he's there for quality control, because if you watch the male, now and then the male will come in on these pictures, and he'll pick up a stick and he'll rearrange it, or pick up the grass and rearrange it. Or he might actually pick one up and not like it and take it out.
Like I said, once she lays her eggs, and after about 14 days, they will hatch out. Now, they grow very, very quickly because they're only in the nest and brooded in there for about 17 days. But after about 8 to 9 days, they've reached 90% of their body weight. Their first flight could easily be 100 yards. With the bluebirds, you want low vegetation. Mowed areas like this out here are very good, with scattered trees. They sit on low perches, they scan the ground, and they fly down, and they'll pick up a moth, they'll pick up a grasshopper, spiders, to take back to the nest to feed the young. And they'll make several hundred trips a day just feeding those young. Farms, parklands, things like that are excellent habitat. Once these birds fledge, and this is where it gets interesting, but once they go out and they're in the trees, they're his responsibility. So he's got to teach them how to hunt on their own. Yeah.
They continue to feed them, right?
What's that?
They continue to feed them after they've left.
He will help them, but he's teaching them. The female, she takes a little bit of a break. Once they're out of there, you want to clean that old nest out of the box. The nice thing about it is bluebirds are really great with nest sanitation. When the young defecate in the nest, it's in almost like a mucousy sac, and it's called a fecal sac. And they will fly away from the nest. They'll go several hundred yards to drop that. They don't want anything leaving anything around the nest site. So those nests are quite clean for the most part. So when you clean that old nest out of there, because the female is going to come back, and she's going to re-nest. Now, the trick is she generally, and this usually, has a different mate. So he's stuck with it, raising these young, and she's got another. That's why it's really great to have a lot more males. And she can go through 3 broods with 3 males, and that's one of the things I found out from bird banding. I'm going back, hey, this is a different mate here, so I banned that bird. Through the season, between each nest, you want to clean all that out there. So keep that.
Does she stay in the box with the little ones every night?
When they're very young, after a few days, no, there's not a lot of room, and so she won't. She'll perch in the trees, outside. She tries to stay with them because she needs to help keep them warm. How high do they nest?
In a natural cavity.
Well, they anywhere from about 2.5 feet off the ground to about 80 feet up in a tree. When I put a bluebird box out there, I try to put it at a good eye level, 5.5 feet off the ground. I don't like mounting boxes on posts or mounting them on trees or anything like that, because all you're really doing is creating a place for a predator to climb. If you mount it on steel pipe, that provides a good bit of protection, and usually either putting a PVC sleeve down here that floats to keep raccoons and stuff from gripping onto it, or even snakes. We grease in the bottom third of the pipe with active grease, because raccoons are a big predator on things like this. And if you're going around checking a box during the day on a trail, at night a raccoon's following it around. The smell, and he's following it to bring it. And a raccoon can come over here, and they'll grab this pipe, and they'll just hand walk this pipe straight up. And they don't hug it. They actually stand back from it, and there's more leverage there. And they'll walk right up, and then they can reach their hand, pull out the young or pull out the eggs. And if you've ever come to a box and find nest material hanging out, that's a good indication it was pulled out by a raccoon. And everybody wants to come up with the perfect bluebird box. The box that I like to use is called the ODNR box. It's got what the bluebird needs. It's easy to keep clean. It's well protected from the weather. Predator guard on here. And the reason we add that extra thickness of wood is to help keep things like starlings and stuff from perching and shoving their head into the box. actually that long beak peck can kill them young. This hole here is 1.5 inches in diameter, and that will basically keep the starling out of it. About the minimum size of bluebirds can come and go freely. It's dry. I've got blade grooves in here so when water comes over the top, it breaks and falls. It's just a simple design, and it only takes about 3 feet of 1 by 12 pine board. And then, of course, you want to paint the boxes. You want to paint the boxes, paint them a color that's light so it doesn't heat up during the day, in the sun. But you don't want to paint them white. White seems to be a real attractant for house sparrows. I use a grass green color. It stays fairly cool. It also blends in very well out there, and especially I have a lot of boxes in public areas, parks, and everything. You want them to be seen, but not to attract a lot of attention. And it just blends into the environment. We've actually hollowed out sections of log for wildlife photography purposes and made it appear a bluebird coming into a native habitat. They'll use that. It's harder to make those things predator-proof. So where you mount it is probably more important than even necessarily the type of box you use. Because you want to mount these boxes, first off, in good bluebird habitat. You don't want to put them in necessarily into brush, because unfortunately, a lot of things get relegated to the hedgerows, and that's not always the best, because house wrens will come in, and what house wren does is they like to come into the box and they like to fill every cavity they can find in an area with sticks. And some of them are pretty nasty sticks, believe me, try to clear them out, poison them. But they don't use them. They'll fill, they're just that little wren. He's just so aggressive and so competitive that he'll fill everything so nothing else can use it. And they'll go in and throw out what they want, but their nest in there. Now they will come in and they will puncture bluebird eggs in the nest. Unfortunately, we can't get rid of house wrens, or they are a protected species. There are a lot of different cavity nesters that will use bluebird boxes. Traditionally, bluebird boxes were cavities that were created in the trees by woodpeckers. They might nest in it this year, but a woodpecker never comes back and nests in the cavity. So he's creating other cavities for other birds. We paired boxes. We found out that bluebirds and tree swallows get along pretty well with each other. Bluebirds will not normally nest any closer to their own species than about 100 yards. But bluebirds and tree swallows will nest side by side. And the tree swallow is so strangely aggressive. They're aggressive. They'll fly down at you, flap their wings, and they'll dart and dive at any other species, where the bluebird doesn't do that very often. So we pair up boxes about 7 yards apart. And you hear in another 100 yards, you can have another couple pair. And that seems to help bluebirds and tree swallows. And especially if you've got boxes anywhere close to water. White-breasted nuthatch and the tufted titmouse, if you can get those two, it's kind of neat to be able to get those into a nest. Especially the white-breasted nuthatch. Well, they will actually nest in a box, but a house sparrow, which isn't really a house sparrow at all. It's a weaver finch that was brought in from England in the British Isles in the 1850s. It just moved across the country. And
why? You see them everywhere.
well, they brought them in. The reason was in cities like New York, now where you had all the horses and the horse droppings, and I guess they didn't like the fact that the horse droppings planted grain in the streets. The grain out of the horse apples. I mean, it worked for a while, but the thing about it is they're so competitive, and they have that heavy weaver finch beak, and they'll go in, and if you ever go in and find like the female bluebird with the back of her head ripped out, that's a house sparrow. These species are not protected. People want to think of it, but you can get rid of them. If you put boxes like right up next to your barns, house sparrows are going to inhabit that pretty quickly. But they literally can be tracked out and disposed of because they're not protected. Another species that's not protected is the European starling. Although I think the starling does have a few saving graces, and they like to get grubs and stuff in the lawn. And we can keep them out of the boxes pretty well. Bluebirds don't normally nest back in the woods. That's just not their habitat. The only time I saw bluebirds nesting far back in any woods was in the drought of '88. But when you get into some areas like that, you'll get mice in the boxes. And once again, that's why it's best to mount them on pipe. You'll get flying squirrels. Of course, raccoons come in. And I love rat snakes, but rat snakes can climb right up these pipes. And they can go in and they'll eat the young, eat the eggs. So by greasing, we would grease, they could actually climb through the grease. So we would start putting red pepper into the grease, and that kept the rat snakes out. Cut that section of downspout with aluminum with enamel coating on it. And you notice around the edges it's got those little flutes. Take a pipe like this, you can insert it on there before you do it, and then use a couple of hooks in that and screw into the bottom of the box, and so it sits there and moves. Rat snakes can't climb that, as they try, but it breaks up their grip. Another thing, of course, is wasps, bees. I was checking one time a bluebird box, and I was on the back of the Cub tractor because I was mowing the wildlife area, and so I came over and I opened up the box, you know, and I was thinking, oh, this is got moss in there, you know. And so that was, you know, a good sign of a chickadee. Now, a chickadee will usually always cover over their eggs. So I wanted to count the eggs. And so I reach in to count the eggs, you know, because I could feel them and count with my fingers. And it was bumblebees. You don't want to just reach into something. And on the tractor, I couldn't hear them. So I don't do that anymore.
You have a cat, you love your cat, bell your cat. It doesn't mean that they might not catch something, a bird, a chipmunk, but if you bell them, you at least give the wildlife some opportunity to hear them before they pounce.
Is a black snake as bad as a rat snake?
Yeah, it's called black rat snake, yeah. They're very good. There's a lot of different things you can try that help predator-proof the boxes. At least 50 feet from bushes and trees, that will help provide protection to the house. When I mounted some boxes on fence posts, I actually mounted them way high above the fence post on a piece of pipe that helps. Anything that's out there in the yard, people got to mow around it. When you get relegated to hedgerows and fence rows, to use the habitat as best you can. Now, when I check boxes, I would take dog repellent, just a can of spray repellent, and just spray that around the box. And that seems to deter raccoons too. And squirrels, flying squirrels, but regular squirrels not too. Woodpeckers sometimes will try to enlarge the hole there. The way you orient these boxes, and I think this is real important too. So I like an overhang here, which helps rain from coming in. I just don't want my young to get wet in the nest. We try to orient it so the box is facing southeast. So that way there's less likely to have rain and stuff blow in. If you face it to the southwest, that opens that up for a lot of sun, and that can get awful hot in there. The other thing is you don't want to put a box facing across the highway, because birds approach it, and they would have to fly across, especially a busy highway. Maybe a backcountry road wouldn't be too bad.
Why do we need to help?
Dr. Larry Zelny, who was the founder of the North American Bluebird Society, but Dr. Zelny worked for the Department of Agriculture, realized that the bluebird population was declining, especially around the turn of the century, around the 1880s, 1890s. It was down to 10% of what had been recorded before. Now, the bluebird never went on the endangered species list, but it was one that was threatened. Dr. Zelny's there's a book out called The Bluebird, Fight for Survival. You can still get that. I still check that on Amazon. It really does have a good little history of it. These boxes and things have helped a tremendous amount in bringing these birds back. Now, there's a lot of things that affect bluebirds, herbicides, pesticides. Traditionally, you know, apple orchards were great habitat for bluebirds, but they used a lot of arsenic. That was really the problem. Now, you know, and arsenic is an element, so it doesn't break down out there. They were really loading the birds up with arsenic. And then, of course, a lot of sprays like that led to a lot of reduced nesting, soft shell eggs. Fortunately, a lot of that stuff has ended. At one time, I can tell about Malabar there, the state was involved in reduced maintenance at parks, and there was a lot of spraying going on around everything. And there was a whole buffet of herbicides that were being used. And Roundup was among them, although I think Roundup was one of the least. I started noticing in the early 80s there, birds that were dying in about 8 to 9 days. They would spray around till everything was dead underneath the box, because that way they didn't have to mow up too close. Around trees, around things. These birds would use this fine, nice dead grass to make nests out of it. So they were bringing it right into the nest. Now, at 8 to 9 days, when these birds were looking good, and then they died. It's at that point in time that the bird shifts from kilothermal to homeothermal. It goes from a cold-blooded to a warm-blooded creature. But I had this happen over a period of about 6 years, and I kept good records on it and wrote this up. Actually, even Union Carbide in Canada wanted to, because they were actually running a bird farm up in Canada, and they asked for my research on that. So Roundup is a glyphosate. It's an herbicide that interferes with the amino acid synthesis in a plant. So many different herbicides out there that were being used. What was used where? I have those herbicides right near where your boxes are. I mean, the birds can go out there and pick up bugs, but my God, if they were picking up grasses that were laced with them.
They were also picking up bugs that had crawled through those same grasses and then feeding it to their young. We're going to talk a little bit about diet. I named this program Bluebirds and Other Cavity Nesting Bug Busters. All of these cavity nesting birds feed primarily on insects in the summertime, and that is what they feed their young. Insects are very, very high in protein for a developing bird. When you think about all the insects that we don't want to have in our garden, or we don't want to have around our home, it would then be very important for us to bring these birds closer to us so that they might take care of those bugs that we would otherwise get rid of with an insecticide. So we actually have a bluebird box smack dab in the middle of our vegetable garden. Birds dropping right down into the garden picking up bugs. As bug busters, it's good to have these cavity nesters. There are some people that say that the tree swallows that will occupy these boxes will consume 3 times their body weight in mosquitoes every day. They are a bird that feeds on the wing, and what that means is that they don't usually perch and peck for their insects. That does not mean that they don't, because I've seen them actually, if there's a swarm around them and they're sitting, they'll reach out and grab. But they don't go into a tree to peck at the bark or at the back of the leaves to get an insect. They're the birds that you see swooping around, diving, and doing all kinds of acrobatics, and that's because they have a very wide mouth, and they just open it up and they just scoop them up as they go. All of your swallows will do that. So some of the insects that they like to eat, caterpillars of our butterflies and moths. Once again, the worm or larval stage of those insects is usually very, very high in protein. If they would eat a butterfly as an adult, they discard the wings, so there's no energy there for them. So the caterpillar is really the stage that's best for them in their diet. Grasshoppers are a good one. Once again, high in protein. Beetles, crickets. They also like a lot of what we call fleshy fruits. When we don't have the insects, when it starts to get colder, and you wonder, well, gee, what are they eating? There's no insects out there. They will go to the bushes that are holding on to their fruit. Now, dogwoods are very, very good for that. Once the dogwood berry falls to the ground, it usually starts to mold or to deteriorate rather rapidly. Other animals will eat them at that stage, but bluebirds will usually not pick them up. If your dogwoods drop real fast, that food's no longer available to them. If you pick the dogwood berries, just as if you were picking a fruit, an apple from a tree, and put it into a clean container, you can put it into the refrigerator for about a month. You can keep them fresh enough that you can then put them into a feeder for the birds. However, bluebirds are not the type of bird, or a lot of our cavity nesters. Tree swallows don't even stick around. They head for South America. A lot of the other cavity nesters are very much like bluebirds in that they'll stick around, but many of them go to eating at your feeders with your seed, like the titmice, chickadees, nuthatches. I'm sure all of you have seen those at your winter feeders, but you don't see a bluebird, and yet they're out there. And that's because they continue to only eat those fleshy fruits. Those are the kind of things that you want to have around. If you're hoping to attract these birds through plantings, then those are the types of plants that you want to put in your yard. High bush cranberry, dogwoods, they'll eat the grubs and the crickets and the beetles. But these are the fleshy fruits. What you see up in the corner here is the dogwood berry. In the center is high bush cranberry. Down here to the left is your infamous multiflora rose. People curse Bob Evans for bringing in multiflora rose. It wasn't Bob Evans and it wasn't Louis Brownfield, I can tell you that. Thank the industrial age. Most of the flowers that we enjoy in our garden, in the old-fashioned garden that your grandmother had, those plants are not native. They came from the Orient. Your lilac, your Rosa Sharon, multiflora rose happened to come into this country about 1865. The industrial age brought us time. Things were starting to be mechanized. I no longer have to stand there and work really, really hard. A machine will do it for me. So because people had time on their hands, they started to develop their gardens very much like the British did. The British had beautiful parks in their backyard. The British, having done a lot of exploring around the world, they had brought home to England a lot of plants. We wanted gardens like that too. So we brought into this country things like lilacs. So the multiflora rose was brought in, If you allow a multiflora rose to do its thing, it has wonderful arcing branches. The flowers on it are very fragrant, beautiful little rose flowers. And the rose hips, as a matter of fact, you can make a tea out of them that's very high in vitamin C. You and I can drink that. It has its advantages. How we did that at Malabar to control multiflora rose is that we mowed once a year. It does not tolerate shade, so we did not see it in the woods. You saw it at the edge of the woods. But if you wait until later and mow up to it, it becomes a hedgerow. And this is one of the reasons why Louis Bromfield, who founded Malabar Farm, and Bob Evans kept that in their fence rows. It's natural habitat. There's a lot of things that you don't want to go through multiflora rows. Goats will. But you can keep hogs in. It's natural fence row, natural protection for wildlife. Food is available year-round. So if you're a wildlife lover, it has its advantages. If you're trying to keep a pristine pasture area, you hate it.
I mean, you don't realize the cardinal is really a southern bird.
On the side of the road, it's all multifloral roads, hedges that are huge, that will stop a 70-mile-an-hour, 55-foot long tractor trailer driving through it.
Right. In the 10 years that Reed and I were at Malabar Farm, we did not have a problem with it, even in the pasture areas. And we had Henslow sparrows, bobolinks, meadowlarks. They are all an open nesting bird that loves high grasses. We had cattle that was pastured in those fields. We'd let that grow until after the nesting season, and then the farm workers would go out and mow the fields. And it kept everything in the hedgerow. We're hardly going to eradicate it because birds like bluebirds love it so much. They eat and their body consumes the fleshy portion of it, and then they eliminate the seeds equipped with fertilizer. So you can see just exactly how that has spread so easily. You can put a post and run a line in between, and eventually you'll have multiflora rows right down that line because the birds will sit on the line and drop the seeds. They like raspberries. Up in the right-hand corner, you see juniper berries, poison ivy berries. They are not affected in any way like we are with poison ivy. Some of these abhorrent kind of plants are actually things that wildlife will take advantage of.
If they're going to be here during the winter, you know, and they do stay during the winter, may as well work to feed and help feed them.
The bird will come into the top of this box, beak full of caterpillars. You can see they're still wiggling there. Watch the bird. Every now and then the bird will throw its beak down against the top of the box, breaking up the animal, almost like masticating it. They don't have teeth, obviously, and an adult bird can just go and swallow that whole, but a young bird, it's a lot harder for them. So if you had a cricket, they have an exoskeleton, so they'll sit there. We've watched them actually sit there and bang that cricket back and forth in cages.
And
that's a predator guard.
That would be, you know, that does appear to be pretty effective against raccoons, because it would be pretty tough for a raccoon to, you know, get its arm up in there. And the bluebirds use them to, you know, obviously you see the
Did
bluebirds.
you see them leave with a fecal sac?
Because the raccoon has a long arm.
Okay, so this bird, see how it just kind of magnet those
Take that.
caterpillars a little bit. And it'll go in, and when it comes back out, it will have in its beak a little white bag, a little fecal sac.
Oh, yeah.
That's the male.
This is the male. Yeah, the male and the female will both assist in feeding, and then, like Reed said, after they fledge, it's all up to the male to teach them what to do out in the wild. Okay? He'll come back out with the fecal sac.
There it is. Yeah, can you stand it?
Okay. See how she's more gray-blue rather than the bright blue? And she'll come out with one too.
We had the side of a box of plexiglass. Every time she would come in and remove the fecal sac, she would take it and then she would rub it on the face of that plastic, and it just smeared, you know. And we'd have to go take the whole thing apart and clean it.
We made them with plexiglass like that one right there. Is that deter the bluebirds, or it's okay, or?
We found that they become accustomed to your activity very quickly. I remember as a child being told, don't go near the box, they'll abandon the babies, don't do that. That's really kind of a myth. Once they have young, they're very determined to try to raise that young to adulthood. You really should stay away from, especially open nesters, because every time you walk up to that nest, you're bringing a scent of yourself. Raccoons and even possum have learned very, very quickly that wherever you smell humans, there's food. They've raided enough garbage cans that they know that human smell means food. And if they can avoid us, we've left something behind for them. He had a friend. He didn't necessarily believe in greasing his pipes or putting a predator guard on. He just felt, oh God, I've never had any trouble with raccoons. In one night, a mother raccoon just marched her young right on down his bluebird trail and took out every one of his boxes. She smelled it, and she brought her babies along, and a smorgasbord all the way down the line. And after that, he greased his pipes. He's also stopped mounting them on the fence posts, too.
But as a beginner, that like he knows exactly when to look at the eggs, get old nests out. I'm not that good at all. Would it help me to know what's going on if I put glass there?
No, you wouldn't want to do that. We did that for filming purposes.
Sure.
We actually have a nest in here where the female and the male, in this case we think that they were killed by a predator. She said, I have a bluebird nest, I have eggs in it, I haven't seen the male or female for more than a week. What's going on? I've been watching. They were there every single day. Now they're not there at all, and the eggs are still there. And so after a week, you have to figure that something happened to them, but you wouldn't have chased them off. First of all, they don't smell like we do. They have to practically swallow their food before they can even taste it. So they don't smell like we do. But they really don't smell your scent. Harassment would chase them away if once the eggs are in there, they're pretty committed. But Reed would check his bluebird trail and the boxes at least once a week. And the birds became relatively accustomed.
If nesting activity were going on, come back more often, check and see what was going on. That's not going to be a problem. The only time that it becomes touchy is when these birds get out after about the 15th day in the nest. Because I don't want them to fledge prematurely. I want them to spend enough time in the nest. For some reason I had to check when it was really close. I'd put a thing over the entrance hole and just leave it there for a little while. And then slip it back off, so that they had a chance to calm down.
So how do you actually check?
The boxes can be opened up.
This box is a front opening box.
These are the boxes. We actually sell the bluebird boxes, and this is the bluebird box that we provide during our tree seedling sale, which is every spring. You see there's a little latch here, but basically it opens up so that you can check the boxes. You check them like once a week and check their progress. Coming in, it's not going to disturb them. Like I said, if they've got young in the nest, they're committed. And they are not going to abandon just because you show up once a week. You don't want to be harassing them and going in every day, 2, 3, 4 times a day to check. We don't want to harass them like that. But to check them now and then. In fact, if you have bluebird boxes, we recommend that you monitor them. You want to know what's going on in the box.
You want to get the old nest.
You want to get the old nest out of there. And you'll know that if you had birds in here and 2 weeks later there's no birds in that nest, they've left. It's time to take it out. If you knew you had birds in there and now there are no birds, because once they leave, they will come back.
A female will come in, she'll build on top of it. And that just keeps bringing, stacked up. Sometimes that happens, and I've had it actually happen too, because she built so quickly. What I would do then is raise up and take the old nest out of the bottom.
Before the little ones fledge, they can no longer get in there and remove the fecal sac. It's just too crowded in the box. The nest starts to get dirty. And when it starts to get dirty, it starts to attract flies. And you can get blowflies in there. They'll puke, they'll hatch out, and the next thing you know, they're sucking the blood of your little ones. The maggots will come up from the bottom of the nest and prey on your little ones. So you want to clear out that old nest. You want to get it out of
You
there.
notice the cuts across there, just
Yes.
something. Those cuts
there.
are like a ladder. Okay, now bluebirds usually don't need that kind of to grip. Tree swallows who don't have very strong legs because they feed on the wing, they need something to help grip, to come out of the nest, especially the young ones.
It gives them toe
Yeah.
holds.
The interval between the second
If you see them fledge, take it out that day.
Yeah,
They're never going to come back.
They won't come back.
They will not come back. They do not roost in these boxes after they've fledged.
The tree sparrows have filled it with feather and grass. Tree swallows have done that, and then moves in the house sparrow, and I've cleaned it out, and it's a real hard process because I mean, boy, they are so boom.
Yeah.
And I had it cleaned out. I was like, and then I saw the bluebirds come and check them out. I was celebrating, but then they left and they didn't come in. And it was the darn sparrows in just that one day.
Yeah, sparrows are very, very aggressive.
Tree swallows, when they use feathers, they're usually just very light, feathers you can toss up. If you find a nest that's got like primary feathers or something stuck in there, it's got a plastic bag, stuff trash, really trashy nest. That's generally a house sparrow. And another good is a house sparrow will also try to dome its nest in there. In other words, it'll actually kind of build up so there's some grasses and stuff sticks over top.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite let them get that far along, but boy, it was amazing how much stuff they could stuff in there.
Well, with a house sparrow, and as Reed said, it's actually a weaver finch. They are a danger to your bluebirds. When Reed and I first met, I knew I didn't really care for house sparrows because I grew up on a farm and they were just like everywhere in the barn and they made a mess everywhere. Dirty little birds, my mother called them. I knew I really didn't like them. Reed would dispatch them, if you will, get rid of them. I kind of wondered why. I didn't wonder anymore when we came up on a box that had grass hanging out of it and he said, uh-oh, we have a problem. And what we found inside that box changed my mind forever. We walked up to the box and no less than 2 female sparrows came out, flying like crazy to get away from us. And what we found in there was a recently dead female bluebird who had no back of her head. It was gone.
That's quite common.
They are a weaver finch. Their beak is a conical beak, very much like a cardinal. And it's used for crushing seed. And it was very easy for them to kill that female. And she was spread out like that, trying to protect her eggs.
I recycled the ones that I had to get rid of because I would feed them I was packing out hawks and owls. He
was a rehabilitator. So the male keeps a harem. One male house sparrow can have 3 or 4 females out there that are his gal. So if you get rid of the female, you've done nothing. He'll sit on the box, sing, and get another female in about 30 minutes. He'll have another to take over that box. If you get rid of him, you've opened up the box for probably 2 weeks. And in that time, the bluebirds probably have an opportunity to get in. You want to humanely kill them. We are not here to tell you to,
You don't want to go out there with a bunch of school kids.
Yeah, I mean, we're not proponents of that. Like I said, what I witnessed changed my mind forever as to whether we dispatch these things or not. But what we usually do is, in fact, any of you that are interested in a device called the Huber Sparrow Trap. It was developed by a man named Joe Huber, a member of the North American Bluebird Society. And basically what he did is he took a coat hanger, an old-fashioned wire coat hanger, and he bent it in a certain way and found a way to attach it to the inside of the front of the box. You don't want a trap in there that's going to kill indiscriminately whatever comes in. You can have good birds go in there. You don't want that to happen. So what it would do is when the birds would come in, they would trip the wire, and a little piece of metal would come halfway over the opening, so that it would allow air to get in, so it would live trap whatever. Now, you don't walk away and leave that for days at a time, obviously. You want to watch it and be checking. But it would allow you then to live trap and know what you have in your box. There were many times that we were able to get the male.
The trap itself is it's attached to just a piece of like 3/8 plywood, cut to fit inside, and then there's a screw here that you drill through a piece of steel, or a door that comes down. And then the wire is bent and attached to the below on the piece of the plate. It's just a plate you take in and then screw it in. So. Okay, and it's attached with the electrical staples, so that it pivots, and then it would just go up there and hold the door, and when they come in, they trip that, when the door drops and they
If
can't get the
anyone
door
is
back
interested
up.
in that,
But it's
just
something
contact
you
me.
you can't just
We'll be happy to
put
send
it
you
on there and
plans
go
for
away.
that. If you live in town, it's probably very unlikely that you're ever get bluebirds. You might get Carolina wrens.
Yeah.
You might get chickadees.
We have lots, we've had bluebirds.
But it's unlikely that you'll probably get bluebirds in town where you're, living on a street where there's house after house. Are you saying that you put them close to buildings or in the fence rows?
Yeah, they are.
Do you have an open area that you mow?
Yes.
Right smack dab in the middle of it. If you don't want to mow around it, dig up the turf and create a flower garden so that you can mow around the flower garden at the base of your bluebird box. But move it out as far away from the shrubs, the hedgerow, and your buildings as you can. And the sparrows really don't like to go where they don't have cover.
Yeah.
Your wrens don't like to go where they don't have cover.
I mean,
Bluebirds, out in the middle of a cattle field, they love it.
Whatever they can find a nest, they'll use it, whether or not it's the best nest that we think for them. They'll use that site, and so we want to encourage them to use sites which are a little safer. What I normally do outside is that I take a piece of pipe. Okay, I drill a hole, and the back is a solid back. I drill a hole here, or actually up here, excuse me, and then a couple holes down here. Okay, so the pipe goes up. There's a bolt that goes through from the inside out. And I drill a hole in the pipe so it comes out of the box, through the pipe, and I put a nut on it here, washer and a nut. And I always bend that over. And then down here, just a wire from the inside, and twist the wire. And that keeps.
I like that.
But yeah, this, I mean, if you're just putting up on your own property, yeah, this is a great way to do it.
I had chickadees and a wren nest recently. Do I need to clean those nests out?
Yes,
just
you
like
can clean those nests out too.
Okay.
Once again, once they've left, they're not coming back.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't roost in the boxes.
Yeah.
After a while, when the nests become messy like that, like I said, it becomes a parasite haven. And so they want to stay away from that.
When I was taking school kids out, I used to open up the box, it's like left in front of me, and then take a mirror, so that way you can direct it, and they can see, the little ones, can see what was going on. But I will tell you one thing, when you're checking any box, one of the things that I do, if I've got bluebirds, let's say in there, I come up, tap on the side of this so she can fly out.
Yeah, otherwise you might get.
I've had to come right out in the face. Okay, you learn quickly. The other thing is, if nothing's going on, you unscrew that box, don't indiscriminately reach in there.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what might be in there. Look first. Because, I've had snakes, But I don't
Do
prefer the
bluebirds
bees.
care whether the door opens up this way or?
No. There are lots and lots and lots of designs out there.
Just like
This is probably the most economical, simple box that you can make. You get a piece. You can get a piece of pine that's 10 inches by 36 inches, and you can make a box. Just a piece of pine board, and you'll get all the pieces out of that. It doesn't have to be fancy. The bird doesn't really care. The size of the base of the floor and the hole opening are really probably the most important.
Root, root for the Copperheads, and no winner's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 steps around at the old ball game.
We encourage you again to check out the
Mom, are we gonna go now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, big guy. Woo! Well behaved. We're not winning.
Stephanie Wood and Ohio Realty bring you
Popcorn.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We will be starting fireworks shortly. We do need to clear everyone from that third base side. So please make your way elsewhere if you enjoyed the game from the third base side. If you would like to watch the fireworks from down on the field, you can certainly do so. I'm walking over to the first base entrance to the field right now. Down here in the first base dugout currently. If you do want to do that, we can enter the field right on down here. We're going to be having to stay right in the foul territory on this side. We are going to let the settlers clear out of it first before we head out to the field. But if you are choosing to do it from down there, please join us down at this location. Thank you much for their support tonight. So if you are sending people down here and it still hasn't dried up completely for the last couple of weeks of